of our pre-K and kindergarten assessment bundle of basic skills. So once you download our bundle from Teachers Pay Teachers, you will begin in the teacher page and direction page. The first page is talking about the Common Core alignment as well as the teaching strategies objectives alignment that this assessment tracks throughout the year. There is advice on how to use in your classroom and how to differentiate between students and grades if you teach either a blended classroom or a looping classroom. We start with how to track performance over time. I like this page because I'm crazy and I really like to track by color. So each different quarter has a different color. Nothing to it, just my crazy and how I operate. Teacher directions are super easy. I really thought about what a teacher would need when she was writing and how she needed that while she was in the classroom assessing and working with other kids. So I really wrote kind of a scripted assessment. It's super easy and it tells you what to say. If you start it in writing, it tells you, hey, can you write your name? Usually I begin with the just a straight line. Students are more able to write there, especially at the beginning of the school year. They write bigger, and so it just kind of gives them the freedom of not having to, write so constricted in a small space. Towards the end of the year, and once I notice that students are able to write their name, I'll use the double-lined page only because then we're starting to assess how neat they write and just preparing them for what kindergarten brings. At the beginning of the assessment is the reading portion. I usually choose a really short story. I have the board book, How Do Dinosaurs Say Happy Birthday? And it's super short, and you could really go through all the parts of the assessment in about 3 minutes while reading it, so it's super easy. One thing that I really like is that I really thought about teacher needs, and sometimes when I'm assessing and someone's crying, someone just threw a block at someone else, two people are fighting over center tags, and your aide is taking data, you really have to multitask. So the great thing is that if you have this script next to you, you're going to be able to deal with what you have to deal with and kind of come back to a place where okay, I stopped at math, shapes, and colors. This is what the question I need to ask. It's kind of an easy way for you to multitask and kind of be inside and outside of your brain at the same time. The first portion of the teacher directions do talk about math and give you different options of the questions that you could ask your students for the colors and the shapes. I have shapes and color posters, so I really have two options of asking student questions. Point to the color or point to the shape, so point to blue, point to the circle, or if I notice that a student's a little bit shyer or just very outgoing and just wants to tell you everything he knows, then I would just say, hey, what color is this? What color is that? Super easy. Math sets like the same. Likewise, I have 5 teddy bears and I kind of play with the 5 teddy bears between both my hands. I'll show them 2 in one hand, then I'll show them 3 in the other, then I'll switch one hand to have 4 and one hand to have 5. And it's super easy and it also keeps the kids engaged. It's supposed to be quick, so make sure you don't give kids time to, sit there and count with their fingers. The sequencing section of the assessment is also a super easy one. I usually have 3 teddy bears at the beginning of the school year. If you are in kindergarten, you could have up to 5 or 7 items. Just remember that it's important that kids know small, medium, large, and then they know this is the next biggest, this is the next biggest, this is the biggest, and this is the smallest, the next smallest, this is the smallest. That language is really important. It's not necessary to know this is the size between medium and large. It's just sequencing from biggest to smallest and smallest to biggest. Row counting is super easy. I kind of do this throughout the day in centers and at the playground, especially at the beginning of the school year. Students know a little bit less, so starting them off by saying, I want to know what the biggest number you know how to count to is, and just counting with them 1, 2, 3, and having them continue. Prepositions is a fun one. I have a dinosaur that has an open mouth, and so I usually give students a teeny tiny teddy bear, and I ask them, put this teddy bear above the dinosaur, below the dinosaur, next to, etc. The kids really love putting it inside the dinosaur, and I think that that's the one that they all get right at the beginning. Producing quantities, I take information from the number they know how to count up to. So if they know how to count up to 10, then I start with 5. Hey, I need 5 teddy bears. Can you give me 5 teddy bears? Can you give me 3? I kind of work from the middle number and then go up by 2 or go down by 2. So if a student knows how to count to 10, I say give me 5. If they get 5 correct, I go to 7, I go to 9. If a student knows how to count up to 10 but does not give me 5 when I ask for 5, I go down to 3, go down to 2, 1. It's pretty easy in that case. Sorting, I just take the wooden shapes out of the table toys and I take 3 shapes of each. I explain what sorting is and then kind of give them a minute. Sometimes they like to play with them. Sometimes they'll build you something, but it'll be sorted. So it's kind of giving them the ability to think about how they're going to sort and what that means to them. And ultimately, if they sort, it doesn't matter how they sort it as long as they sort. Number recognition, at the beginning of the school year, I will only assess 1 through 20. The preschool curriculum in my state has students knowing numbers 1 through 30 as well as rote counting 1 through 30. So I really don't want to waste the student's life or time. I'm pretty sure they very, very rarely do they know up to 30. And this is number recognition as well, out of order. So it's very rare that they know up to 30. In kindergarten, I would start with number recognition up to 50, out of order. And if student doesn't know the number or the letter when we get to the letter section within the first 2 seconds, you're just going to, I usually tell them the numbers. If I show them a 5, they don't know what it is. I say, this is 5. They repeat it. I put it down. Again, show them a number. They don't know it. This is 2. Have them repeat it, put it down. I show them one less number. This is 1. They repeat it and I put it down and I move on. It's important that we don't make kids lose confidence in not knowing or asking for help. This is an assessment. And so the more they know, the happier they get. And the less they know, they get a little subconscious. So I try to not give them more than 3 opportunities and just say, I see your brain is working really hard. I really appreciate it. Let's move on to the next game. Patterning is a fun one. Very rarely do kids know how to create their own patterns at the beginning of the school year. So what you'll be doing is making one and seeing if they're able to extend it. So super easy. Alphabet, blends, digraphs, and sight words. I don't test the students at the beginning of the school year in preschool on this because I know that very rarely will they know any of this. Towards the middle of the school year and definitely at the end of the year, especially the top 25 sight words, I will assess the students in the sight words, and some students will get to blends and digraphs. This is very student specific and they're based on goals that we have in the classroom. So again, this is something that I would not do during the beginning of the school year if you know your students aren't there. However, for kindergarten, I would definitely assess on the top 25 pre-primer words, blends and digraphs, and alphabet, only because at the end of the year, you will have gone through all of this information through the Common Core state standards, and you want to be able to give parents a yearly overview of progress. We talked about the alphabet a little bit ago. I want to make sure that I just go back and talk about how we really want to make sure that students are able to recognize capital letters. So I'll sit there and I'll assess only capital letters. And if students know the sound, I'll show them the letter and I'll ask them to tell me what the letter is, the name of the letter, and the sound. And if students know the letter and the sound, then I'll ask them to give me a word that begins with that letter. Throughout this, it's super quick and easy, kind of like before. If they don't know within the first 3 seconds, I tell them the answer and move on. If they miss 3, I move on from letters. After they've done the capital, the sound, and a word, I move to lowercase. For preschool students, lowercase words are a bit more difficult to learn, and so it is likely that they will learn what these look like by the end of the year, just not at the beginning. If at any point there is an articulation error, this is the section that I write it in. If a student says see, but it sounds like sh, I will write sh, sounds like sh, and kind of do the parentheses. For the Spanish syllabus, I have syllaba cards and I do them out of order but per letter. So I will only assess the M syllabus. I will only assess the P syllabus, etc. There's really no need to mix them up the letters by letter because it's really not going to be beneficial if the student is not there yet. So you want to make sure that you stay in a letter horizontally across because the a, e, o, u stays the same instead of going vertically down. Even though some kids will understand that it's ma, pa, sa, ta, ka, etc., it is easier to go horizontally. Student at a glance is for parent or principal communication. It's super easy. It is not meant to give parents crazy data that they're going to be overwhelmed with. That's for you. What I did is break down accuracy rate. So most of the time, or an accuracy rate of 50% or more is where you would check if a student got 50% of the time more. Some of the time, 50% to 30% accuracy, and not yet, but we're working on it. So this is less than 30% accuracy. It's super easy. You just kind of check mark, give this to the parents. It's important that they know where their student is, but we don't want to overwhelm them. And sometimes if a student is just having a harder time, or if you're in a blended classroom, or if you're in a mixed age classroom, it doesn't help that parents say, well, this student is doing this and that student is doing that. It's about making the assessment information available to the parent for their own child. It's kind of like differentiating for parents. And then I aligned all of the tasks to the Common Core as well as the creative curriculum objectives, which for all states should be aligned to your state standards. So if you have a principal that really needs to know everything about how you're aligning to standards, you could easily go to the creative curriculum website and align it to your own page. And the last part is this behavior note. I think that it's really important that you end information and communication with parents with some behavior notes, and as well as like some good notes. I call it like the bad news sandwich. So just kind of give them the things that their student needs to work on, some behavior notes. Cynthia's doing a great job here. I see her working hard there. And then maybe if the behavior notes are not exactly what you want to hear, you should end with something that you are proud of their student's doing. The last 2 pages are super easy assessment tips, kind of some of the information that we've talked about here. And then I will quickly go to the actual assessment. The pre-K assessment in English starts with reading. There is a section for anecdotal notes, goes into math tasks, shapes, colors, recognizing small sets, sequencing, sizes, rote counting, quantities, producing quantities, prepositions, and sorting. If at any point you give a student assistance, which is completely fine, I'm all for differentiation even during assessment, write accommodation given, and then in the note and accommodation section, just write Q1, restated the question, gave the student options, etc. It's all about really letting parents know and your administration know that your student knows this information consistently with this accommodation. Number recognition, patterning, alphabet, blends and digraphs, pre-K sight words. Not necessarily pre-K, as pre-K sight words are not part of our state curriculum or standards. However, it is important that students are able to kind of work on recognizing them. I would really not assess them other than to know if they know them. This is not something that we work on every day, but it is something that I'm interested in knowing just how prepared these kids are for kindergarten, because if you think about it, if they know these 25, they're already 25 words ahead. And then kindergarten tasks or sight word tasks. It is the FRIES Top 100 sight words. I know district to district it changes, but in my district, students need to leave with a functioning knowledge of the first 150 sight words. So I thought that this was a great start to all of those sight words. And the student at a glance page. This page is for the parents. Print it out, fill it out, make a little check mark on the accuracy rate for the student, write a behavior note and a good note at the bottom for the parents to be proud. We have one for pre-K and we have one for kindergarten. If we go to the Spanish section, has a lot of the same ones, actually has all of the same assessment except for, and you guessed it, the Spanish alphabet has che, ella, ñ, r, and it starts with sílabas. So kind of check off as you assess your student and what sílabas they know. The fluidez de palabras, these are not sight words, as Spanish does not really, students really don't learn how to read Spanish by memorizing sight words, but it is some of the top Spanish sight words in early children's literature, and it's some of the really simple single sílabas or double sílabas like mama, papa, niño, niña that are super easy that some students might recognize, not necessarily mandatory, but just something they might recognize. The student at a glance, pre-K, kindergarten, and the last part of the assessment is the writes name section. So like I said, I begin with this single line. It's much more free and students are able to write at the beginning of the school year. They'll probably write much bigger as they have a weaker grip. And then towards the end of the year, or when your students are able to write in a more confined double line space, this is the page that you would use. So thank you so much for allowing me to give you a little tour of the assessment bundle of basic skills. If you have any questions, let us know, and we look forward to all your comments. Thanks.